Ah, the best car in the world and the best 4x4. Not my words, Jeremy Clarkson's words from the early 2000s. Is it right in 2020? Is this still the best car in the world and the best 4x4? Although these L322 Range Rover Vogues have aged very gracefully, so has the price. With depreciation being at its highest, you can pick one of these L322s up for around £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 with high mileage. So today we're going to see what you can actually buy for that money these days, what problems occur, because unfortunately there is a few, and if it's worth you actually getting yourself into one of these. We're also going to, of course, ask the age-old question, why are they so cheap? Starting off with the styling, personally I think these have aged very well. You can facelift these very, very easily into the newer 2010 or 2011 facelift lights and grills that can be purchased off eBay for not a lot of money. You can of course put bigger wheels, lower it a little bit, but I think this one today doesn't look too bad considering the price. I think over the last few years there's been a huge influx of these cars coming down in price, where people are buying them very, very cheap, and unfortunately they are becoming expensive to maintain, so people dip out of them very, very quickly. I believe this is part of Range Rover ownership. If you're going to go for one of these cars, you need to be prepared for the other side of it, which is the maintenance side, because of course when these cars came out they were a £70,000 car, so they still need to be maintained like a £70,000 car. So styling wise, it is big and bricky. This is probably my favourite generation of the newer Range Rovers. I do like the P38s, but I think the L322 has a little bit more purpose to it, with the bricky looking outside and that fantastic split tailgate, and of course easy access in and out of the vehicle because of the sheer size of it, which means in daily driver terms it's a very, very easy car to deal with. Inside, I do think they've aged really well. This generation is probably the cheaper generation to buy at the moment, and although it doesn't look too bad and it has aged particularly well, the infotainment unfortunately hasn't. Although all of the buttons, like the heated seats, the climate control and everything else, does still work in this one, and they're very intuitive and you can get along with them very easily. So from the driving position, you are driving a genuine Range Rover product, and today, 12 years later, after this one had been produced, it still feels like a proper Range Rover. But enough of me waffling. What's it like to drive? Fundamentally, people out there aren't that interested in a car like this. I personally really am. So to drive this is something that I've wanted to do for a while. I haven't actually driven this, series of Vogue Range Rover in many, many years. So a few years down the road, what's it now like to drive in comparison to other 4x4s that I've personally owned in the past? You guys remember I've owned a BMW X6, I've owned an X5, multiple Porsche Cayenne with the same sort of generation as this. Those cars have the same sort of characteristics as this car, where they are depreciated enough for you to get in, they're high maintenance costs, but to own and enjoy on a daily basis, there's something about it. And I do like my 4x4s. I know there's gonna be a lot of people in the comment section of, especially a video like this, like I did in the previous Range Rover Sport video about cheap 4x4s like this, and unfortunately or fortunately I do see a lot of it out there. So I do see a market for something like this. The second-hand market is flooded with cars like this. This being a second generation facelift, but they didn't change it, but they did change it in a sort of way, the 2007 model year. It is desirable for the sake of £5,000 that you can get yourself into one of these with a bit of mileage on it. It isn't a bad shout. But what's it like to drive? Well, the driving position is incredibly high. In comparison to your, Range Rover Sport or Porsche Cayenne, this has a greater driving position than those two cars. Instead of being in the car, you're more on the car. That isn't a bad thing, because I can pretty much see everything. I can see right down the car, I can see the front, I can see the back. So it isn't that hard to actually daily drive this thing. It also, of course, to go with the Vogue SE, it has the reverse camera and sensors all round, again, giving easy access in and out of car parks and various other places. I'm trying to think of what you guys need to really know about this car. Yes, there are flaws. There are many flaws in this Range Rover shape, and that isn't a bad thing. I'm not here to out the Range Rover Vogue and tell you guys not to buy one. In fact, I would encourage it more than anything, but you've got to remember, just like any performance car, cars like this were £70,000 at one time. That means that they do come with that maintenance cost that the 70 grand car did at that time. So if you can buy it for 5 grand, that is a fantastic bargain for a car like this. But remember, you are driving something that was 70 grand at some point, so that will reflect in the maintenance. And again, as Jeremy Clarkson said way back when, he is a huge fan of the Range Rover, and I am too. I'm a big fan of the Range Rover, especially the Vogue. It is glorious motoring. It does everything you could ever want. A few other things to point out is that this one being a 2007 shape, it is still incredibly refined. Again, reverting back to the price of this car, you know, say you're paying 5, 6, you know, 7 at a push for a low mileage one, I think that is a banger of a deal. If you need to daily drive something, drive around, you know, you want something that's a little bit more luxurious, this definitely has the luxurious side ticked. It isn't too much of a boat to drive around in. You're going to notice a big difference from going, you know, from an estate car, say, into a 4x4 of this size. So you will feel it, you know, a little bit more wallow in the suspension, but that does mean it softens the bumps up quite a lot at the same time. So positives are that this car is very cheap. They are fantastic value for money. They've done their depreciating. They're not really going to go any further down. There's a lot of them in the market. The market is completely flooded with cars like this. So if you do want to go out there, you can buy a high spec one. This again is a Vogue SE, so it has, you know, the Harman Kardon sound system. It has various other things within this car. If you have the money and you have the time, find a good mileage autobiography one. I think that would be the one to go for in this generation. But again, there are enough out there for you to pick and choose which one you want. Things to look out for, I'm going to say this to the people out there that actually want to go and buy this car. Suspension is one of the biggest problems in this L322 generation. Again, talking to the owner and talking to other, you know, various people that have owned these cars, air suspension goes, you know, not frequently. It is the biggest problem within this shape Range Rover Vogue. Other things like the turbos do go on the V8 models, which is the one I'm driving today. So again, look out for that. And I would really say just go and drive one. You would then understand what's wrong with it. If it judders in gear, you know, it's got a funny transmission. If it doesn't go up and down on the air suspension, you'll know full well that the air suspension is broken. If it's got lights on the dash like a Christmas tree, which most of them do, this one doesn't. There's no lights in front of me whatsoever. That will indicate, of course, problems with the car. Other than that, guys, I would encourage people to go and buy cars like this. If you need a daily driver, yes, I understand there's a lot of people out there that would prefer a estate car over a 4x4, but I think the generation at the moment, I see loads of Range Rovers, Cayennes, everything out there. So if you can get into this market for a relatively cheap price, yes, the maintenance costs will be a little bit greater than other cars, but you've got to treat it as such. That's just sort of the Range Rover way. If you're paying this little for a Range Rover, it's gonna happen. But I do think if you're paying this much for a Range Rover, you sort of are expecting a slight downside. I don't see it as a downside. I see it as someone buying a 70 grand Range Rover Vogue for 5 grand, which is an absolute steal. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you did like this video, please give it a like. This is the newer style of review-based content that we have on the channel, so please leave your feedback in the comments below and tell me, would you buy a Range Rover? I'm always here to show you guys what you can buy for your money, but would you actually go ahead and buy one? Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.